Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony in Diversity, and this week we're speaking to Parvyn Kaur Bennett. She's a dancer and a singer, Australian-born of Indian descent. Thanks for coming in, Parvyn.
Thank you for having me.
This will be an interesting interview because we're going to be speaking to a young person. A lot of the people we speak to are older and more mature in their religion and their life. But here we have a young woman of Sikh background, dancer, singer, cultural dancer, singer. So I'd really like to explore that process.
Well, I think my opinion is as valid as anyone else's.
Yes,
but it is just my opinion and what I've managed to understand in the short time that I've had on this planet until now.
We'll look forward to it.
Great.
So you were born in Adelaide,
Adelaide in South Australia.
To a Sikh family?
Yeah, both my parents were born in Malaysia, and they both went to England to study nursing and accounting. And from England they got the opportunity to migrate to Australia. It was either Canada or Australia were their choices, and they chose Adelaide. And my sister and I were both born in Adelaide. My elder sister was born in the UK, but you know, when we were growing up in Adelaide, it was very much less populated by the sort of Indian community as it is today. Since the last few years even, there's been an intense migration of Indian students and things like that. So I think the Australian public is a lot more used to the multicultural kind of vibe that you get, especially in Melbourne, for example, where it's everywhere. When I was growing up, we were the only Indian family in the neighbourhood.
Oh, really?
So we were the only Indian family at my school, which meant that it was a bit of an unknown, but because it was unknown, people were intrigued.
Yes.
And my parents spent a lot of energy sharing our culture, the food and the dance. And I remember being in primary school at assemblies doing Bollywood dance routines right from the start. And so it was something that just became normal for me and my friends. And when they came over to my house, they would have Indian food, and my house would smell different, but that was just normal because it was me and I was a normal child. So it was a really lovely kind of upbringing for me. I'm the youngest of my family, so I do believe my eldest sister, she had a much rougher time going through school, and she had some sort of instances where I think someone called her something at some point and she knocked them out and gave them a blood nose. My parents were called in, but that's part of our culture as well, is that you don't take anything from anyone. You stand up for yourself and you stand up for your rights. And I think so once I got to high school, it was already that just don't mess with the Singhs because you will regret it. But I never had a problem at all.
Nice. But it sounds as though it's a coherent concept of family that you grew up with.
Very much so. And as soon as my parents came to Australia, they started connecting with the already existing Sikh community that was there, but then also facilitated in starting the Sikh Gurdwara, the Sikh worship place, was started by my parents with the help of the other, a lot of the Sikhs that were in Adelaide at the time were professionals, doctors and lawyers that had migrated over here. So it was a very sort of educated, close-knit community that were able to have the resources to start the Gurdwara and hold events and things like that. So my parents were just really passionate about our culture and our religion, and so made sure that we didn't miss out on that, even though we were away from the majority of people being in that culture.
What was there any tension between who you thought you were, like the Australian and the Indian Sikh? Was there a tension there?
Not really. My dad was, as soon as he got to Australia, just really adopted the Australian cricket team, for example, and we were always barracking for Australia when it came to all of those. And I think that's part of nationalism, is being part of that community and being proud of that community and barracking for it. Sometimes it gets overblown, like most things. So there was that really strong Aussie factor, which was drilled into us, and even in primary school, just singing Advanced Australia Fair at every assembly, because we're quite a musical family, we were often the ones that were leading in choirs and things like that, singing those songs. So that was very strong. But then on the other side, the Sikh element was incredibly strong. We had the Guru Granth Sahib at home, so there was a dedicated prayer room for the Guru Granth Sahib where every morning we would go and would do our morning prayers, and then in the evening as a family we would sit down and do the evening prayers as well. And I remember those times. It was probably quite frustrating as a child to have to sit down and do these sorts of things, but for me I quite enjoyed it, spending time with the family in that way, and just listening to the prayers being sung was something that I always enjoyed, and I look back at it and am very grateful for that sort of discipline of being able to sit still for an hour at a time and not be doing anything but sitting cross-legged, which is, you know, a skill in itself that I'm very grateful for. It's kept me flexible and nimble. So both elements, and then obviously on the weekends, Sunday mornings, we would go to the Gurdwara, and one of the main parts of a Sikh a congregation is the singing.
The singing, yes.
So the whole Guru Granth Sahib is written in song. And the main thing that you do is you get together and you sing songs, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there would always be this lovely tasty prasad at the end of it, which is flour and butter and sugar mixed together, and it's just, so you always knew that if you sat down for long enough and participated that you would get that prasad at the end of it.
And I'll get into strife if I don't cut us off right here.
Sure.
We're out of time. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. We're speaking with Parvyn Kaur Bennett. She's a dancer and a singer, an Australian of Indian descent. And we were talking about the Guru Granth Sahib and the social connection of being a Sikh. What about the scholarly connection? What did you do as far as school was concerned?
In my normal school upbringing, I went through the public system, Australian government public system, and I had incredible teachers, incredible opportunities. As a child, I was very kind of athletic and very active. I remember the early years I was very much a loner at school. I would spend a lot of my I connected with my teachers quite a lot, and I guess I was quite a teacher's pet, but I would spend recesses and lunches by myself on the top of the monkey bars. Well, you know, it's a good place to be.
Yes, certainly isolated.
But then once I got to like around year 5 and 6, and I did things like jump rope for heart. I actually went for national competitions in jump rope skipping. So, and I think those sorts of things where you're out at lunchtimes with other people with their skipping rope, and I was very much into netball and things like that too. So that was primary school, and obviously I was in the choirs. I had a teacher who was just so enthusiastic and incredibly energetic, which I'm so grateful for, because I know how hard it is to be a teacher. I teach in schools now as well. I do a cultural Indian music and dance show around primary schools around the country. And so I know how exhausting it is to constantly put that sort of energy out. So the teachers that I had, though, were really encouraging, not only on academic wise, but the extracurricular activities of school were really encouraged. And I was encouraged to share my culture and all those sorts of things at assemblies. And then high school, public high school, my high school was known to be a bit of a druggy school, actually. But I never saw that side of it. There was a great music program, there was a great sports program. I think as a child you find what you are looking for in those environments, and and you surround yourself with the sort of friends that you want to be like, I think. And I was never had that. I mean, I'm sure in year 8 and 9 I wanted to be one of the cool kids, and I wanted my skirt to be short and all those sorts of things that my mum struggled with so much, but we got there in the end. And it's good to have that balance, and I would put it up and she would put it down, and that's a very much an Indian cultural thing as well to maintain. I remember in year 8 so well when it's time to wear skirts, and it was a very big thing at home. But the thing, I was travelling as a musician as well.
Even in those days?
Yeah, back in, so I was would leave school, back in primary school as well, I'd leave school for months at a time and go and travel overseas and perform, singing Sikh spiritual music. And my teachers were great. They would send me away with, make sure you do a journal and here's worksheets, and I'd go away and I'd come back. So I think in school I was quite independent, because I didn't have that. I was a little bit different. I was definitely a little bit different. So I got a lot of attention from teachers and stuff like that. And then education, Sikh-wise, was mostly from my parents, but then we would also regularly attend Sikh Sammelans, which are Sikh youth camps. So holiday camps that you kind of woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you would go through the Nityanem, it's called. There's prayers that you do in the morning and the evening as part of the Sikh kind of way of life and the structure of the day. And also learn about the history of Sikhism, the gurus. There are 10 gurus in the Sikh religion. And then all of the different characters that are around that, all the stories, all the sons and the warriors. The Sikhs were the religion was born in a time of conflict in India, when the Mughals came to India and were forcibly converting the Hindus to Islam. And there was the emperors, and so it was Nanak. Guru Nanak was the first guru of the Sikhs, and he kind of just went, I don't belong anywhere. I am of the universal truths, and I believe in love and peace and equality for all types of people, for all genders as well. There was a lot of gender inequality in India at the time, a lot of practices like the practice where if a husband died, the wife would throw herself into the funeral pyre. Those sorts of things, which is just crazy. So he spoke against that. And when Nanak passed away, there was actually a kind of conflict around that time. Was he a Muslim saint or was he a Hindu saint? And so they say that he was half cremated, half buried. Anyway, there's a lot of mysticism that goes along with it too. It's hard to really know what happened back then. It was 500 years ago. But the Guru Granth Sahib is made up, so that's our Sikh holy book. And is now revered as the living Guru, the 11th Guru.
Yep.
And in that book is writings from Nanak and from the first 5 gurus of the Sikh faith, and also Bhagats and Pandits from the Hindu and Muslim traditions whose writings were around the same time as Nanak, which reflected the same sort of philosophy,
Yes.
is in that book.
Yeah, yeah. So when you were raised in a house with a place for the Guru Granth Sahib in your presence, that inculcated you. It was sort of a sacred, holy place.
Definitely,
yes.
yeah. And it was a place that I could go no matter what, that I could sit and meditate, and that gave me strength.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to meditate at the moment because we're out of time. We'll be back in a moment.
Mani Alleluia. Mani
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Parvyn Kaur Bennett. And she's a dancer and a singer, an Australian born but of Indian descent. Now, you're married.
Yes, I am married.
Tell me about that, because I think the man you married is a non-Sikh.
Yes.
What happened with that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to define the lines of Sikhism, but for me, what I was taught is that we are all equal, and that what your aim in life to do is to be a good person and to be aware of other people and your impact on the environment and your usage of material things, your attachment to material things, and all those sorts of things which make sense to anyone if you really think about it properly. And so I never felt restricted in who I could befriend and who I could hang around with, and eventually who I fell in love with. And my husband is a musician who is very dedicated to Indian classical music to start off with, and that's how we first met, was through the music. And he is very well educated on the Sikh religion and of Indian culture. We travel back to India very often. He actually speaks better Hindi than I do.
Well, there you are.
So, I mean, he might not look like he's Indian or be born in that environment, but we're from the same culture. We're both from Adelaide. We grew up a couple of suburbs away from each other, and we both love music, and we're both people that want to dedicate our lives to art and to understanding as much as we can about how this universe works, and to spread that on to the next generation, and to spread that feeling of love that we have for ourselves and for each other and for our music and our work to as many people as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, there was difficulty allowing myself to fall in love with him to begin with, because I was very intellectually aware that it would cause discomfort within my family and within my community, and I would be judged and seen in a different light to what I had before that. The perfect Sikh daughter and all those sorts of things. So intellectually, I was very aware that was going to happen, but you can't control love. You can't control those sorts of things. And for me, he was just the person that I found that made me what I want to be in this life.
Well, part of that common ground, of course, would be the music. Because he had worked with you in your overseas trips as well?
Yep, so he was very well versed with the Sikh traditional music and understood it really well. And he has a genuine love for the Sikh philosophy.
Yes.
Really, he really does. That's how we initially met. But it goes beyond music. It goes to all aspects of life. He's a scientist. He's an engineer, electrical engineer in his background. I studied university as a chemical engineer as well. I didn't follow through, but he actually... So I think that science and music, art, brain, there's a lot of connections there. But he's a curious person, and so am I, and we like to experience all cultures, and it's not just Indian music that we connected with. It's Brazilian music, it's bluegrass music, it's gospel, it's everything, soul, funk, jazz, blues. And I think that was it. It wasn't just that we had the interest in Indian music. In fact, from being with him has encouraged me and made me go back to India and study Indian music, whereas before that I never even thought that that would be something that I would do. So he's actually brought me to that.
Brought you more into it.
From all of the other styles that I like.
Well, with say the community, like how long have you been married now?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. So in the community now, how is a non-Sikh accepted into the Gurdwara and all of the goes with that? Is it just...
I think it's become such a normal thing for mixed marriages to happen.
Right.
So it's happening within every family, so you can't judge other people for it happening when it happens in your own family as well. So it's very well accepted.
Yes.
In my circles.
Yes.
In the community that I am a part of, because I'm not a part of the communities that won't accept it. You know what I mean?
Of course,
so
yes,
like there are, with every religion, there are different levels of understanding of what being in that religion means. And the rules that are associated with being in that religion.
Yeah, well, my experience of Gurdwara is that the Sikhs are very accepting and generous people. So I can understand that that's probably the case. So your music, and if you come back next week, we're not finishing yet, but if we do, we could talk about that more.
Yeah.
But your music's consolidation, the Indian dancer, singer, how did that evolve? I can hear that you started way back and you worked with your parents, etc. How is it the continuum? Why are you still doing it now, in other words?
It makes me happy.
Well, that's a very good reason.
And I have worked very hard to, and I do work very hard to make it my life. And I am so grateful that I am able to make a living out of what makes me happy.
Yes, yes. And you do the training at schools?
Yeah, I teach, we do shows and tours, but just touring as a musician, playing night after night is very hard work, and organising those tours is probably a lot harder. So, I mean, there is the aspects of performing and practising and doing that, but the difficult part is we're also self-employed, so you have to be on top of all those business side of things as well, which a lot of people don't realise.
Absolutely, that's right. It doesn't just happen. There's a lot of work goes into it, a lot of practice, a lot of commitment.
But when I am doing music just for myself, the love that I feel and the awareness that I get from that.
Awareness?
Yeah.
I have an awareness that time is running out. Right. But I've already asked you, will you come back next week?
Yes, of course, of course.
Thanks very much, Parvyn. We'll be back next week, speaking more with Parvyn. Goodbye for now.
Shanti Om.